All right, let's just jump right in. When we think about Western civilization, where does it all come from? What's the source code? Well, a huge chunk of it was written thousands of years ago in the sun-drenched lands of ancient Greece. It really is the foundation, the original blueprint for so much of what we see around us today.
I mean, just think about these concepts for a second. The idea that we, the people, should rule ourselves. The whole method of questioning everything to get to the truth. The art of telling stories on a stage to figure out our own lives. These aren't just some old, dusty ideas. They are the pillars of the modern world. And they all got their start right here.
So the big question is, how did this happen? How did one civilization in one corner of the world produce so many revolutionary concepts that would literally echo through thousands of years? How did it go from myth and scattered tribes to become this incredible beacon of thought and culture? Well, that's the story we're going to unravel.
So here's our roadmap. First, we'll look at how the Greeks were forged from even earlier civilizations. Then, we're going to jump into the crucible of war and politics. After that, we'll explore their absolutely mind-blowing explosion of culture and intellect. And finally, we'll see how their legacy became our own.
All right, let's kick things off at the very beginning. The forging of a people, from the ashes of old worlds to the rise of the incredible city-state. First things first, to really get a handle on Greece, you kind of need a map of their timeline. Historians usually break it down into four main periods. We start in what's called the Dark Age, which was a time of collapse and change. Then we move into the Archaic period, where the real foundations were laid. Next up is the famous Classical period. That's the Golden Age. And we finish with the Hellenistic period, which is when Greek culture basically went global.
Now here's what's so cool. Greek civilization didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It actually grew out of the rich soil of even older, really fascinating cultures. You had the sophisticated Minoans on the island of Crete building these massive, complex palaces. And on the mainland were the Mycenaeans. These were the first advanced folks to actually speak Greek. They built these powerful fortress cities and were major traders. They were the direct ancestors of the classical Greeks.
So after the Mycenaean world collapsed and the Dark Age ended, a whole new way of organizing society came about. It wasn't one big, unified kingdom. Instead, you get the polis, the city-state. I want you to imagine hundreds of tiny, independent countries, each with its own army, its own government, its own laws, and a fierce, fierce sense of pride. Athens, Sparta, Thebes, these weren't just cities, they were entire worlds unto themselves. So you've got these city-states, and they're getting crowded. Resources are tight. What do? Well, the Greeks looked outward, and it sparked this huge wave of colonization. Things like the disciplined hoplite soldier, the fast and agile tree worship, and even the invention of coinage. All of this fueled their expansion. They set up new cities all across the sea, creating what they called Great Greece, and basically painting the Mediterranean Greek.
Okay, so now that we've set the stage, let's dive into our next chapter and see how this world of rival city-states was put to the test by war, totally transformed by a radical new idea, and almost torn apart by its own rivalries.
All right, so the first huge test for this Greek world comes from the East. The Persian Empire, the biggest the world had ever seen, decided it wanted to conquer Greece. What happened next is one of the greatest underdog stories in all of history. Against all odds, a bunch of these Greek states, who were usually fighting each other, teamed up. From the legendary sacrifice of 300 Spartans at Thermopylae to the brilliant naval victory at Salamis, they fought for their freedom. And you could argue they saved the future of Western civilization in the process. And that really gets to the heart of what they were fighting for. See, after the Persian Wars, Athens just exploded into a golden age. And under a leader named Pericles, they perfected this truly revolutionary idea, democratia, rule by the people. The idea that ordinary citizens, not kings or tyrants, should hold the power. It was the seed of a political system that would, quite literally, change the world.
But here's the thing. Greece wasn't just one big happy family. It was dominated by two superpowers that were complete opposites. On one hand, you had Athens, a bustling democracy, a sea power built on trade, and the world's center for philosophy and art. And on the other hand, you had Sparta, a rigid military state ruled by two kings, where every aspect of life was dedicated to discipline and creating the perfect soldier.
And you just knew, right? These two completely different ways of life, they just couldn't exist side by side forever. The very same allies who fought off the Persians turned on each other in the devastating Peloponnesian War. It was a brutal, decades-long civil war,
pitting Greek against Greek. And in the end, Athens was defeated, and the entire Greek world was left exhausted and vulnerable.
But here's the crazy part. While all this fighting and politics is going on, something absolutely incredible is happening beneath the surface. This period saw one of the greatest flowerings of human creativity and intelligence in all of history. So let's explore their world of gods, thinkers, and theaters.
Right at the center of all this was this amazing intellectual lineage. It was like a torch being passed from one genius to the next. It all starts with Socrates, the guy who walked around asking questions, forcing everyone to really think about what they believed. His student, Plato, took those ideas and built entire philosophical systems around concepts like justice and reality. And then Plato's student, Aristotle, came along and basically invented formal logic, categorized the natural world, and set the stage for science for the next 2,000 years. Just incredible. And you can't talk about the Greeks without talking about their myths. I mean, it was completely woven into the fabric of their lives. They had this pantheon of 12 Olympian gods, led by Zeus, who they believed were constantly meddling in human affairs. Their entire culture was built on epic poems like Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, stories of gods and heroes that every single Greek knew by heart. And when it came to big decisions, they'd go to the mysterious oracle at Delphi, whose strange prophecies could start wars or found entire colonies.
And maybe nothing shows their shared culture better than the Olympic Games. Think about this. Every 4 years, a sacred truce was declared. All wars had to stop. Athletes from every city-state would travel to Olympia to compete, not for money, but for the glory of an olive wreath and to honor the gods. It was this powerful moment that reminded everyone that, despite all their fighting, they were all one people, the Hellens.
You can literally see this obsession with order and beauty in their buildings. They developed 3 distinct architectural styles, each with its own vibe. First, you have the Doric. It's simple, strong, and powerful, just like you see on the Parthenon. Then came the Ionic, which is more elegant and slender, with those famous scroll designs at the top. And finally, you have the Corinthian, the most decorative and ornate of them all. This wasn't just about building. It was about math and beauty carved into stone.
And they didn't stop there. They also invented something we all know and love today, theater. People would gather in these huge, open-air amphitheaters to watch plays that grappled with the biggest questions of life, fate, and what it means to be human. The great playwrights, Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, wrote dramas that are so powerful they're still performed today. It just proves they were masters of the human heart, not just logic.
Which brings us to our last big question. How did this civilization, weakened by its own wars, not only survive, but go on to leave such a massive footprint on the rest of the world? In our final section, let's trace that unending echo through history.
Well, the next chapter of the story belongs to a young Macedonian king who had actually been taught by Aristotle himself, none other than Alexander the Great. He didn't just conquer Greece, he took its culture and spread it all the way from Egypt to India. After he died, this new Greek-influenced world, the Hellenistic world, eventually came up against a new power, Rome. But the Romans were so impressed with Greek culture, they didn't crush it. They absorbed it. They basically became the delivery system that carried the Greek legacy into the future. And trust me, that legacy, it is absolutely everywhere. When we vote in an election, we're taking part in a Greek idea. Thousands of our words, especially in science and medicine, come directly from Greek. Our entire tradition of logic and philosophy stands on the shoulders of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Our art, our buildings, even the way we tell stories, it all has the unmistakable DNA of ancient Greece. They really did write the source code.
So that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. When you look at the world right now, with all of its problems and all of its progress, which part of this ancient Greek blueprint do you think matters most? Is it their radical experiment in democracy? Is it their relentless search for truth through philosophy? Or is it their timeless vision of beauty and art? The truth is, there's no easy answer, because all of those threads are still woven deep into the fabric of who we are today.